Hi guys, welcome back to part 3 of our Scratch tutorial. So we're looking at this session to program the car correctly to make sure it can go left and right so that we can dodge around the rocks and the trees but also collect the apples. If you follow along so far, you should have it so that your trees, your rocks and your apples are all programmed so that when you click the green flag, everything moves up. If you hit the rock or the tree, your lives go down. If you hit an apple, your score goes up. If you haven't quite done all those yet, you need to go back to parts 1 and 2, make sure those are finished before you move on to this next part. If you are ready for this next part, we'll make a start. Now, when you're doing your car, the first thing we need to make sure is at the start of the game, our score is set to 0 and our lives are set to 5. Now I'm choosing to set my lives to 5, but it's your game, so you can choose however many lives you want to give your character, whether you want to be really generous and give them 10 or 20 lives, or make it really difficult and give them sort of 2 or 3 lives. It's entirely up to you. To set your lives and your score, you need to come onto your events one and you need to use your green flag. You then need to go back to your variables and make sure you set your lives to however many you want. I'm going to use 5. And you set your score, so change the lives 1 to score to 0. So you set your lives to 5 and your score to 0. So that means when I click the green flag now, you should see that my score goes to 0, my lives go to 5, which it does. And straight away I lose the lives because I hit the rocks. Now, once we've done that, we can start working on how we actually control our car. So we need to make it move left and right. Remember, we don't actually need to make it go up and down in this one, because the trees and the rocks and the apples are what are making it look like it's moving down. We don't actually have to make it move down. All we need to do is make it move left and right so that it can dodge around the rocks and pick up the apples. To do that, the first thing we need to do is make it point in the correct direction so that it's pointing towards the left or the right, depending on which direction you want to travel. Now, I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard for these directions. You can choose whatever you like for your directions. So if you want to use the A and D key instead, or other keys on the keyboard, it's entirely up to you. I'm just going to use the arrow keys because it's nice and straightforward, because right means right, left means left. So to do that, I go to my events and I choose my when key is pressed. Now I need 2 of these because I'll need 1 for the left arrow and I'll need 1 for the right arrow. So when I press left, it will go left, and right, it will go right. Now the first thing I need to do is make sure that when I press the arrow, it points in the appropriate direction. So I'm hoping that when I press the right arrow, it will point towards the bottom right corner. When I press the left arrow, it will point towards the bottom left corner. To do that, I go over to my motion tab and I choose my pointing direction. Now I'll need this on both of them, so I'm dragging it on twice. Now the right arrow needs to be set at 45, okay, and the left arrow needs to be set at 135. Don't worry that these directions seem a bit strange to begin with. That one seems like it's pointing up into that corner and that one seems like it's pointing down into this corner. That's simply to do with the way we've designed our car and where the computer considers the front of the car to be, okay. So make sure you've got these numbers in correctly, and the way to test is simply press your arrow keys, and I'm pressing the right arrow key now and you'll see that it points towards the bottom right, the left arrow key and it points towards the bottom left, like that. So right and left. If that's not working for you, double check your numbers and check you designed your car the same as me. Okay, now when we go back onto our coding, the next bit is to actually make it move in that direction, because at the minute it points in the right direction but it doesn't actually move. We want it to work so that when I press my left key, it will carry on moving left until I press my right key. Now what I mean by that is I don't want to have to keep pressing the left arrow lots and lots of times to keep making it move left, and I don't want to have to keep pressing the right arrow lots and lots of times to keep making it move right. I want to press the left arrow once and it'll keep moving left until I press the right arrow. To do that, I need to come over to my sensing one, okay, and you'll see that I have this option here of a certain key being pressed. Now I'll need 2 of these on, so I'm just going to drag these on for a moment, and then I'm going to go back to here, okay, on my control 1 I have this option for repeat until. So I go repeat until here, and I drag the same one on again. And what I'm going to use these for is to keep repeating, moving right, and keep repeating, moving left until I press the appropriate key. So I'm going to drag that into the box there and here. Now if I'm pressing the left arrow, I want it to repeat, I want it to keep going left until I press the right arrow, and vice versa. If I press the right arrow, I want that to repeat until I press the left arrow. So they should be opposites. If it says right arrow at the top, it should say left arrow here, and if it says left arrow at the top, it should say right arrow here. So what I need to then do is actually use my movement. So I go to my motion, and remember when we set our rocks and our apples, we were using the X number for their horizontal position. So it's the X category that deals with left and right movement. So I'm going to go to my change X by 10. And I'm going to put that into both of them. So these are looking very similar at the minute. The only things that are different are the left arrow and right arrow and the direction, but the structure of them looks the same. Now the number I choose for my change X will be how fast it goes. Now 10 will be too fast. If I show you that in action now, I'm just going to move this over. When I press the green flag and I press the right arrow now, you'll see that it goes much too fast. And same if I press the other one. Now I need to change this. So instead of using 10, I'm going to set it to 1, and I'm going to see if that is too slow. Right arrow moves it to the right, left arrow moves it to the same. Now these numbers must be the same. If I put 1 in here, it should be 1 in here. However, it's moving to the left, so instead of 1 it needs to be -1, because remember, positive numbers will move it to the right, negative numbers will move it to the left. So now when I press left, he will move to the left, and when I press right, it will go to the right. Now you might look at that and say, well, that's definitely too slow. It is, and I agree, because he can't move quickly enough to avoid the rocks or catch the apples particularly well. So I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it to 3. Now the speed you decide for yours is entirely up to you, whether you want it to go very fast or very slow, but you've just got to aim to make it an interesting game that's challenging but not super difficult or super easy. So I've set it as 3 and -3. So when I press the green flag now, he moves fast enough that I can dodge the rocks, but not so fast that I'm crashing into the trees and I'm struggling to control it. And it's still a bit of a challenge because I'm still having to dodge out of the way when the rocks come up. Now I could probably make that go maybe 1 faster, but I'm going to leave it on 3 for now. The final bit you need to decide for your movement of your car is, where is your car going to start? So you can start either right at the top, or you can start quite far down towards the bottom. The closer you start to the bottom, the less reaction time you'll have when a rock comes up or an apple comes up. So if you're starting right here, if an apple or a rock come up over here, you probably won't have time to get to them. So the best place to start, I find, is probably roughly 3/4 of the way up. Not right at the top, but about 3/4 of the way up the screen. But again, it's up to you. You choose your own starting position. So you should be in a position now where when you play, it looks like the game we started right at the very beginning. Almost exactly the same. The car's moving, you're collecting the apples, and you're dodging the rocks. Now, we need to add in an extra bit. So this will be the final bit that we'll add in before the game will technically be finished. I will show you one extra bit that you can add in if you want to, but it's purely optional. The last part is to make sure the game actually ends if we run out of lives or score a certain number. Because at the minute, if I got to 0 lives, nothing would happen. The game would carry on and I would keep losing lives and getting to minus numbers. Instead, I need to make sure that the game actually ends when I get to 0. To do that, I've moved these out of the way because I'm now focusing on this section here. I'm going to add in on here a forever and an if one here, and I'm going to do the lives getting to 0. If you want to do the score as well, you just do exactly the same but replace the lives here with score. Okay, now to do this I need to go back to my operators. I could set it so that if the score equals 0, the game ends. However, there's a slight problem with that, a slight risk. It's possible in this game to lose more than one life at a time. If I hit two trees that were right next to each other at the same time, I would lose 2 lives instead of 1. That means that if I had 1 life left and I lost 2 lives, my score would become -1. In other words, my score would never equal 0. So that means the game would never end, because it would have gone straight from 1 life to -1 life and would never have equaled 0. So the condition I put in to stop the game if I got to 0 lives wouldn't work. Okay, so instead of using the equals one, I need to use the greater than and less than symbols. Okay, now it doesn't matter which one you put in so long as you remember the correct way round for them. Okay, remember the larger one should be at the open end of the arrows at the greater than side. So I'm going to put in this one here. Okay, and I'm just going to put it in there. Now I need to get my variable lives on, because I'm saying if my lives is ever less than 1, because the way that works is if my lives ever become less than 1, so that includes 0 and -1 and -2 and so on, the game will still end. So long as I've got less than 1 life, then the game will end. It doesn't matter if I lose 2 lives at one go like before, the game will still end. So I take my lives one here and I put it at the smaller end. So whichever way around you've gone, I've put it at the less than end, the smaller end. And in this one, I've put the number 1. So if my lives is ever less than 1, so that includes 0, -1, etc., I then need to go into my control, and you will see that I have this option for stop all. Stop all means end the game, game over. So now, if I lose all my lives, my game will end. Okay, use this one. The same principle if you want to do the score, but change the lives one to score and set your score to be the other way around. Okay, so if your score is ever greater than a certain number, it will work. So now the game should work. So when we play, we're collecting our scores, but if I'm deliberately going to crash now, so I lose all of my lives, the game stops. So we've made a simple game using lots of different aspects of Scratch, lots of different skill parts of Scratch for you to have a practice with at home. I'm now going to show you one optional extra bit. If you've already got this far, you've done really well, so you don't need to feel like you have to do this if you don't want to, but it's an optional effect that I think improves the game a little bit. And that optional effect is I'm going to give the car a little explosion, so that every time it hits a tree or a rock, I get a visual effect signifying that I've lost a life. To do that, I go into my car's costumes and I simply copy by right clicking and duplicating that one, and then on top of here I'm going to simply draw an explosion. So I'm going to get my paintbrush, I'm going to choose a nice orangey colour for my explosion. So I've got my paintbrush and I've chosen a nice orangey colour, and all I'm going to do is just to the side of my car here, I'm just drawing a very simple explosion, and then I'm going to use the fill tool to fill it in. Then I'm going to go over it with, instead of an orange, a yellowy colour, and just do it inside again, just to make it so that it looks a little bit more colourful, a little bit more like an explosion. Again, just use the fill one to fill inside of it, and then I'm going to go back to my arrow, I'm going to put a box around them, and then I'm going to group those two things together so that they become one object. Then I'm going to move it over my car like that. So I've got an explosion on my car. You can see it appear on my screen like that. If I wanted to make the explosion a little bit bigger, I can make it a bit bigger if I want to. Okay, once I've done that, I need to go back to my code. So at the minute it's on its explosion. Now to do this bit correctly, I need to make sure that at the start of the game, when the green flag is clicked, he is on the first costume, car number 1, the first car, because if you look, that's car and that's car 2. So I need to make sure that at the start of the game, when I click the green flag, he switches to a normal one. I then need to make it so that when he touches a rock, it will explode, or when he touches the tree, it will explode. Now this bit is a bit long-winded because it means going in and adding another bit of code into each of these, but it's a really simple piece of code. So what I need to do, okay, is I need to go into my first tree and I need to go to my events, and I'm going to broadcast a message. So I'm going to send a message to the car to change its costume when it gets hit by one of them. So to do that, I bring on the broadcast and I'm simply going to change it to a new message, and I'm going to call it explosion, like that. Nice and simple, like that. So I'm going to add that in to here, but before I do, to make my life a bit easier, I'm simply going to copy it to all of the rocks and the trees that are there. So this bit does take a little bit of time. Okay, so you've got to go into each tree and each rock, because they all need to do exactly the same thing, remember, because every time he hits any tree we want him to have the explosion, and any time he hits any rock we want him to have the explosion. So I'm just making sure that I've copied it into all of them. I don't need to do the apples, because remember, touching the apples is a good thing. So once I've copied it into all of the trees and the rocks, I simply take it to my lives one here and I insert it there. So I've put it in the next block there under change lives, broadcast explosion, and I go into each one and I take that bit that I've just copied in and I copy it into every single one. So bring it back up and copy it into each one. So that's that tree, and then keep doing that and keep going until you've done all of it. So again, Scratch is a little bit annoying when you copy and paste because it doesn't put it in the same place. It just, as you can see on each one of mine, every time it's done it, it's added it down here, which means I've got to drag it all the way back up here. So don't worry if you can't see it initially, have a look round in case it's done exactly like it's done on here and brought it into the wrong place, so that it's moved it further down than it needs to be. Again, this is a little bit boring, so if you need to fast forward past this part, that's okay, but you just need to make sure that you've gone into all of your trees and all of your rocks and you've added in this broadcast explosion. So if you remember from when we've done this kind of thing previously in class, a broadcast is a message that the computer sends that all of the other sprites and the other programming on Scratch can hear. So it's like a signal telling it to do something. So what's happening here is every time he hits a tree, the tree is sending a message. He's sending this explosion message, and then in a minute, once we've got them all copied, we're going to make it so that when the car hears that explosion message, he changes his costume. So the car will change his costume when he hears that explosion message. Almost there, just one more to go, and then broadcast on the last one. There we go. So every single one now has added that broadcast part in. What I need to do is go back to my car and I need to add in another one that if he hears the explosion message, he'll change to his explosion, but then he'll swap back. So I'm going to put my green flag in again. So I've now got my fourth block of code on my car. I'm going to go to my forever, so forever here, and my if statement. Sorry, not if. I don't need to go to if. It isn't in the if one. It's in this when I receive one. Scratch that. Oh, that's my mistake, sorry. When I receive explosion, your looks, you switch to costume car 2, which is the explosion, and then you simply wait for a moment. So 1 second is easily long enough, and then you can switch back to your normal costume there. Car to car 2, wait 1 second, back to car 1. So if we watch that in action now, you should see that if I lose a life, my car gets its little explosion effect. So I'm driving along, I hit the rock and I explode, I hit the rock and explode, and it should work with the tree as well. Yep, you can see there and if I do it one more time, I've lost the game. Okay, so that bit there with your explosions and your costumes is entirely optional. You don't have to do that. The game will still work without it, but if it's something you want to push yourself with and add on an extra bit, then by all means do. Now, just because I've stopped the lesson there, that doesn't mean you need to stop if you don't want to. You can start experimenting, adding more things on, adding extra special characters that come on and move around a little bit more that he's perhaps got to dodge, or adding on a bit more detail to your game. It's entirely up to you, but you've now got a completed game that you can play that's used a lot of your existing programming knowledge to use once you've started. Okay, so you're ready to play your game as soon as it starts. That's it from me for now, so I will be posting some more video lessons for you guys in a little while, but for now, keep practicing on Scratch and make sure that once you've completed your work, you've saved it to your computer. Okay, good luck for now, and I'll see you again soon.